It's nice to see faces, actually. I think I said that we would pick up with chapter 13, Secret Riddle. Hermione's helping hand. We briefly discussed, Harry and Hermione talked about people being wanted as they came in. Harry said he wasn't. I think we talked about why he wasn't. Well, kind of. Can't say too much about that yet. Silver and opals, all that's important there is we see what happens to, well, not all, what happens to Katie Bell. So, I want to pick up with chapter 13, Secret Riddle, and a couple pages in. This is going to be 250, 59, somewhere around 259, 260, I think. Harry's having another lesson with Dumbledore, and Harry talks with Dumbledore about his suspicions about Katie Bell. And Dumbledore says, don't worry about it, I'll take appropriate measures and such. Harry felt slightly resentful at this. And then Dumbledore gets to the point at hand. You will remember, I am sure, that we left the tale of Lord Voldemort's beginnings at the point where the handsome muggle Tom Riddle had abandoned his witch wife Maripe and returned to his family home in Little Hangleton. Maripe was left alone in London, expecting the baby who would one day become Lord Voldemort. Harry, how do you know she was in London? Does Harry have any other... Does Harry have any other reason or basis for knowing why or believing why? Maybe not as a baby, but at least later in life, Tom Riddle, a.k.a. Lord Voldemort, was in London. You're nodding. What is it? He was in the... Okay, that's going to come up pretty quickly. What else? What other piece of evidence? Book 2. Tom Riddle's diary. Anybody remember what Tom Riddle's diary has on the last page, I believe? It's got the road where the diary was produced, Vauxhall Road, okay, which is a major thoroughfare in London. Okay, now that could just be that's where the diary was made and has nothing to do with Tom Riddle. But we are going to find out that the orphanage was near there. We won't find that out until actually book 7 because they try to find it. Okay, so Dumbledore talks about the evidence of Caractacus Burke. Okay, and he mentions, co-founder of Borgin and Burke's. Right. So he, notice swills the contents of the pensive. So he's got the pensive, and are we actually told how he does it? No, we are. He does it like a gold prospector did in California in 1850. Born and raised in California, field trips were to the gold, 2 or 3 field trips were to the gold country and practice prospecting, that kind of thing. So he takes the pensive, and remember this thing is stone, so it's not light. He takes it in his hand and he does this. And makes hard to describe what the stuff is, right? It's not water. It's not liquid. It's like fog. And it swirls around, right? And then up comes a little old man. Caractacus Burke. Next page, or possibly on the same page you're on. Okay? And we find out Caractacus Burke bought Slytherin's locket from Meribay. Dumbledore gives the pensive an extra vigorous shake. He goes back down. Caractacus Burke. Harry, he only gave her 10 galleons. Okay, so we're told the locket that she sold had belonged to Salazar Slytherin. So how old was it? Minimum 1,000 years. Okay, so he got the steal of the century with that. If you buy any, well, with very few exceptions, if you try to buy something that's over 1,000 years old, you get on eBay, you get on some antique site, etc., because you can find it. You can find an awful lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's over 1,000 years old you can get for $4, $5, $10. You can get Roman coins for about $5 because there's thousands of them available. Okay, so this isn't like that. This is a one-of-a-kind kind of thing. Okay, Dumbledore. Caractacus Burke was not famed for his generosity. What kind of store is Borgin and Burke's? Keep going. Yes, it sells dark art stuff, dark artifacts. It's a pawn shop. Okay? Pawn shop owners, pawn dealers, they're not there to give you the best price you can possibly get for what it is you're trying to hawk. Because who goes to pawn shop? I'm not, this isn't pejorative or judgmental or anything. Who goes to pawn shops to sell things? People who are hard up for cash. Really hard up for cash. That's why you can go to a pawn shop and you can get, a relatively decent price on, for example, don't ever tell your intended about this, a wedding ring. Or gun, or, all kinds of stuff. I've never actually been in a pawn shop, but, take that back, I have, down on the square. When I don't think it's still there anymore. So, she was alone in London, near the end of her pregnancy, Dumbledore says, in desperate need of gold, desperate enough to sell her one and only valuable possession, Harry. But she could do magic. She could have got food and everything for herself by magic, couldn't she? Interesting question. What is Harry possibly suggesting? Louder? Robbing. Okay. Go to a house, not expelling Ernest. Scipio, like he does with his broom in book 4, make the food come to him, possibly. What else might he be suggesting? It's an idea that's going to come up in book 7. When Harry first meets Hagrid, Hagrid says, what? Harry says, there's a ministry for magic? He says, yes, to keep us secret from the Muggles. Why? Because if the Muggles knew there were people who could do magic, what would they want? Magical solutions to all their problems. Harry's kind of suggesting, if you can wave a wand to do magic, you can do what? Inventio fudo, Book 7, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are going to be traipsing around the countryside, and Ron's going to start bitching, moaning, complaining because he's hungry, and Hermione's going to point out, you can't make something out of nothing. Well, my mother. No, not even your mom can't, Ron. You got to have ingredients. you got to have something to work with, you know? Even Peter Pettigrew has got to have something to work with to bring Voldemort back. Dumbledore. Perhaps she could. You're right, Harry. Maybe she could have done magic. But it's my belief, guessing again. Now, when Dumbledore says guessing, does he just mean, put a blindfold on and kind of like this? A blind shot in the dark? No, it's an estimated guess. It's a guess based upon the blanks he's been able to fill in. Okay? But I'm sure that I'm right, that when her husband abandoned her, Maripe stopped using magic. I do not think she wanted to be a witch any longer. She thought being a witch was what turned him against her. True? No idea. What's another possibility of what turned him against her when she stopped giving him the potion? Compare his home with her home. The manor house on the hill. If you don't know anything about British culture, manor houses were usually the largest houses in that area, like sometimes even the county. They go back often to the Middle Ages. It would be the area that all the people of that, it would be the house that all the people in that area would flee to if there was some kind of attack. Not necessarily a castle, but a large house. And it would often have a stone fence around it so that people could come inside, doors could be closed, food and supplies would be stored there so they could ride out, the proverbial storm. Describe Marvolo Gaunt's home. It's a shack. So, upper class and not peasant, but dirt poor, essentially. It's also possible her unrequited love and the attendant despair sapped her of her powers. Notice Dumbledore says that can happen. Notice despair. What's it literally mean? No hope. No hope. And Dumbledore says that can stop your powers. Where do a magician's powers or a wizard's powers or witch's powers come from? Do they come from this? No. Do they come from the proper pronunciation of spell or charm words? No. Where do they come from? Expecto Patronum. Out of the heart. See? I beat this horse deader than dead. Yesterday in my Tolkien Rowling course. And we might get to it today. There's two different kinds of magic portrayed in these novels. There's, we'll call it this, Lord Voldemort's kind of magic. And there's Albus Dumbledore's kind of magic. This does not mean dark magic. Okay? This kind of magic is the magic done with wands, spells, potions, etc. In other words, this is the kind of magic they teach at Hogwarts. These are all what? In fact, you could, well, I never thought about this before. You could extrapolate this to this is the kind of quote unquote magic many, I won't say most, many universities now teach and emphasize. This is all skills in technique, abilities. We'll talk about this in a moment. So, if it's this versus this, then this is not that. Okay? It has something to do, Dumbledore's, has something to do with the opposite of despair. So, lack of hope, no hope, hope, and maybe a few other things that Harry kind of introduces us to. She wouldn't even stay alive for her son. What's he implying there? Dumbledore raises his eyebrows. When somebody raises their eyebrows at you, what does it usually mean? A couple of possibilities. Louder? He's getting to a point. Okay. What else? Surprise. Like, really? Shock. Could you possibly be feeling sorry for Lord Voldemort? If you feel sorry for somebody, what does that show on your part? You care for them on some level. Compassion. Empathy. Notice compassion, the passion part, and the pathy part in empathy. The passion and pathy, those two words are related. The passion is Latin. The pathy is Greek. They both mean to feel. Come, C-O-M, to feel with. M, same thing. To feel instead of. So you're feeling what that other person is feeling kind of instead of that person. You're identifying with that person, and with compassion, you're identifying with that person. Okay? Also tied to both of those in our regular usage of showing empathy, feeling compassion is what? Big overarching idea. Love. Okay? Could you be feeling sorry for Lord Voldemort? No! Notice, said Harry quickly. Why does he say it quickly? How dare you even suggest something like that, Dumbledore? You know I hate Voldemort. I mean, what did he tell Dumbledore when Dumbledore dropped him off at the Burrow? If I go out, I'm going to take as many Death Eaters as I can. You know, I'm going to turn my wand into an Uzi. It's going to be a Uzi spell distributor kind of a thing. Spoken like your father's true son, Harry. Way to go, Dumbledore says. And yet, we're going to see a scene towards the end of Book 7 when Dumbledore is going to tell Harry, don't pity the dead. Pity the living. Anybody know how the rest of this quote goes? And those who live without love. And what is he telling Harry there? Don't answer it. We'll get to it when we get there. No. But she had a choice, talking about Merope. Not like my mother. A choice to do what? To raise her child. To, even before she could raise her child, to live for her child. She had a choice to live for her child. And notice how Dumbledore takes that statement and turns it. Your mother had a choice too, Harry. Right? She could have lived. Harry's heard the choice given to her. He's heard it in his memories. Step aside, silly girl. Step aside, Voldemort says to her. No, not Harry, not Harry. No, please not. She chooses not to step aside. She chooses to die for Harry. Okay? Does Merope die for Tom Riddle? No, she doesn't. She doesn't. She dies. Why? Because of the lack of this from anybody. Her husband didn't show it to her. Her son, he's a baby. How do babies show love? They don't really. They don't. They just kind of exist. They're the neediest things on the world, in the face of the world, until they get a little older, right? Did Caractacus Burke show her any love, any mercy? No. Merope Riddle chose death in spite of a son who needed her. But don't judge her too harshly, Harry. She was greatly weakened by long suffering, and she didn't have your mother's courage. What else did she not in here, what else did she not have that Lily had? She didn't have a James Potter. Yeah, when Lily dies, James is dead. But he's only been dead, a minute or two. But she had the previous years with him. Okay? She had, what John Updike says in a poem, Dog's Death. Don't read it if you've had a dog just die. She had a love that would uphold her. All right? Long suffering. Describe her family life. You can use two words. Marvolo, Morphin. Enough said. So, Harry says, where are we going? Dumbledore says, now you're going into my memory. Okay? So, here we see the orphanage. Notice, what's the lady's name who runs the orphanage? What's her name? Mrs. Cole. Okay? Rowling likes to do things with names. Because how else could you spell that name? What do bad children get in their stockings for Christmas? Coal. It's cold. It's hard. It's unforgiving. Notice her name is not Mrs. Pretty. It's not Mrs. Sunny Disposition. It's not Mrs. Light and Air and Flowers. Okay? Rowling loves Dickens. Charles Dickens, every name in a Dickens novel has significance. And by the way, in most of them, the heroic character, the protagonist, has initials either DC or CD, or many of them, not most of them. Okay? David Copperfield, for example, why? Charles Dickens, same initials. But he creates names that give us indications of the kinds of character they are. Same here. Describe Mrs. Cole. What do we immediately see about her? She's an alcoholic. She runs an orphanage. What kind of person, in an ideal world, obviously an ideal world wouldn't have an orphanage, but, work with me. In an ideal world, what kind of person would you want running an orphanage? A very matronly woman. Matronly, motherly. The kind of woman who, you get a scraped knee, you can run to her and she's going to hold you and clean the knee and put the bed. Mrs. Cole's not that woman. Okay? So, we see young Tom Riddle, 10 years old. Describe him. Well-adjusted, happy-go-lucky, smiling all the time, lots of friends. No. What do we see? He's a bully. Okay, keep going. He's selfish. He's vicious. He takes things from other people. He takes things and kills them from other people. The little bunny and stuff. What is that an indicator of in our world? 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds who kill, torture, dismember little animals. What do they often become? Serial killers. Okay. Those are the psychotic ones. Those are sociopaths. Okay. So, Dumbledore meets him, tells him he's special. He says, yes, I know I'm special, essentially. Dumbledore says, I'm a wizard. I want to take you off to a wizarding school where your abilities can be controlled and honed and fashioned. Prove it. Prove you're a wizard. What does Dumbledore do? The wardrobe bursts into flame. Tom's like, where can I get one of those? Where can I get... In time, All right? So, notice young Tom Riddle says, my mother can't have been magic. Why? Because she died. So what does he assume about magic? Yeah, it'll keep you from dying. Now, he's 10 years old. Is that a fair assumption for a 10-year-old to make? Yeah, sure. Because a 10-year-old who hasn't known his mother and has been raised by Mrs. Cole, what's he going to think? My mother wouldn't abandon me. Something must have happened. If she had an ability to not abandon me, she wouldn't abandon me. And yet she kind of turned out did abandon him. Right? So, they come out of the memory. And Harry says, man, he believed that a lot quicker than I did. That is, he was a wizard. Dumbledore, yeah, you caught that then. Okay, what else? He was a Parselmouth. Yep. A rare ability, Dumbledore says. One supposedly connected with the dark arts, though, as we know, there are Parselmouths among the great and the good, too. Name one. The books up to now, even to the end, name a Parselmouth other than Slytherin, Marvolo, Morphin, Tom Riddle, and Harry. Name one. Because notice the first four are all what? They're heirs of Slytherin. They're either Slytherin or heirs of Slytherin. And what else are they? Not very nice. On the good-evil spectrum, they fall closer on this side. Yeah, I don't know if I'd say Morphin is evil. He's bad. He's rotten. Marvolo, yeah, he's kind of closer to the... Okay. How come Harry can speak Parcel Tongue? You mean he transferred a bit of himself in? Yep. And Dumbledore tells Harry there in the book 2, the reason you can speak Parcel Tongue is because Voldemort transferred some of his powers. Okay? So, who are the other great and good who can speak Parcel Tongue? We're not told anybody. Though it's possibly implied Dumbledore can. He at least hears Parcel Tongue. Okay? So Dumbledore says, you notice some other things. Do you notice how he reacted when I said the name Tom? Yeah, he kind of didn't like it. Why? Used to be a phrase. I don't think it's used anymore because of wacko ideology. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Why? Because they were the three kind of like most popular male names, at least in the United States. Okay? And those Which one's first? In other words, it's common. Young Tom Riddle wants to think what? Nothing common about me. I'm extraordinary. Okay? So, Dumbledore finishes that chapter with, you'll hear Death Eaters refer to themselves as Tom Riddle's friends, or as Voldemort's friends. He says, they are deluded. What does it mean to be deluded? Is it just to be wrong? No. It's to see things wrongly. It's to see things improperly. It's like seeing through this window right now, which in my 29 years here, I would swear, has never been washed. Okay? They believe Tom Riddle is their friend, but he's not. Because what does he do to his friends as well as his enemies? Crucio. Avery's. Poor little slob just can't get it right. Hasn't happened to him 3 times. Right? Felix Felicis. We're not going to talk about. Go on. The Unbreakable Vow. We're not really going to talk about, other than Slughorn's party. Harry goes off to. Harry sees Snape. He sees Malfoy. He follows them, and he overhears their conversation. Why is it significant? He overhears enough to know Draco's got something to do. He doesn't know what. Harry doesn't know what. And Snape offers to help him. Okay? And Draco turns him down. In fact, Draco doesn't only turn him down. What else does Draco do? What does Draco reveal about himself? Or let me put it this way. What does Draco reveal about his relationship now with Professor Snape? I don't need you. You can't help me. Not you won't, you can't. Okay? And how does he speak to him compared to the previous 5 books, especially the first 4 books? He speaks down to Snape rather than looking up to Snape like he does in the first 4 books. Something has happened in the dynamic of this relationship. Okay? What? We don't know exactly, but we're given pretty good evidence. What does Draco show Borgin in the chapter Draco's Detour? Harry's watching, right? And what does he do? He pulls up the sleeve of his robe. Where else have we seen that image? Louder. Darkmark. In the book 4. Snape does the exact same thing to show Fudge the dark mark. Okay? Again, Harry doesn't actually see the dark mark. But why else would you do that? So, Very Frosty Christmas begins with Ron talking about the Unbreakable Vow that Fred and George tried to get him to do when he was 5 and they were 7. Kind of to me at least, kind of a problem within the conceptual world of the novels. They're 7. They shouldn't even be able to do this at all. Okay? Plus, they don't have wands. So, a couple pages in, about page 330, they're at the Burrow. It's Christmas. I'm going to leave this stuff up here because I'm going to hopefully get to it. Lupin's there. Harry's there. Mr. Weasley's there. And they're talking about Snape. Well, Harry is talking about Snape. Let me put it that way. And about what he saw. He told Mr. Weasley everything he had overheard between Malfoy and Snape. Okay? Pause for a second. What's the problem with everything he had heard between Malfoy and Snape? We saw this idea partially in The Lord of the Rings, and we see a whole bunch of it in this series of books. He was doing what, by the way? He was eavesdropping, right? What's the problem? You know where I'm going. He didn't hear the full story. Why did Voldemort choose Harry? He didn't hear the full prophecy. Snape only heard part of it. That's the problem. Harry's trying to base a decision, a course of action, based on incomplete information. And when I teach Intro to Lit, that is kind of my definition for the genre tragedy. When a character makes a decision or is forced to make some kind of decision or take some course of action but doesn't have all the necessary information to make that decision. And the classical example is the character of Oedipus in the Greek Oedipus myth. In the Greek myth, Oedipus is told, first by a drunk, well, in the Greek myth, he's told, he receives a prophecy. You are destined to kill your father, marry your mother, and bring to the light of the world a race, children, that everybody's going to shy away from. And Oedipus, who loves his father and his mother, but not in that way, runs away because he doesn't want to do those things. Here's the problem. The parents that he has, unbeknownst to him, are adopted parents. They adopted him. So he runs away thinking, I don't want to kill my father, sleep with my mother. And he runs right smack dab into his real biological parents. And therefore fulfills the prophecy. Fate happens. You can't run away from it. He doesn't have the information. Okay? So, Mr. Weasley says, has it occurred to you that Snape was simply pretending? Pretending to offer help so that he could find out what Malfoy's up to? Yeah, I thought you'd say that. And then he raises the question, how do we know? And this is a branch of philosophy called Epistemology. How do we know what we know? What is one method that we know things? How do I know that this door is hard? That's how. I could bang my head against it all day long. It's not going to suddenly become soft. Empirical knowledge. Knowledge through the senses, right? People, don't go there. Yeah, what the hell? Our society so tries to insulate and inoculate people from problems that they're not able to develop what? Think Harry. Character. Thick skin. You've got to suffer a bit in order to learn to roll with the punches life throws so that you can learn to take the punch and then go back, move on, okay? That's part of epistemological or empirical knowledge. How else can we know? We can use logic. How do you know 1 plus 1 equals 2? 1 plus 1, count them together now, class. 1, 2. That's how. Even though, some new maths, really, like in the last 2-3 years, says, no, you can't do that because that's all Western. And so, Harry, how do we know? It isn't our business to know, says Lupin. Notice, know. Factually, kind of logically, reasonably know. He says it's Dumbledore's business. Dumbledore, he's suggesting, knows the truth about Snape. Dumbledore trusts Severus, and that ought to be good enough for us. Why? What's the logical argument he's making? Dumbledore trusts Severus. The conclusion is that ought to be good enough for us. What comes between this premise and this conclusion? We trust Dumbledore. Okay? Harry, but okay, just entertain the idea. What if Dumbledore's wrong? Dumbledore trusts Severus. Dumbledore's wrong. Next premise. Therefore, we shouldn't trust Snape. People have said it many times, says Lupin. It comes down to whether or not you trust Dumbledore's judgment. I do. Therefore, I trust Severus. Dumbledore trusts Severus. I trust Dumbledore's judgment. Therefore, I trust Snape. Okay? Pretty good syllogism. But Dumbledore can make mistakes. Right? What did he say at the beginning of his lessons with Harry? Or even back in the Order of the Phoenix. He said, I'm smarter than most men. Therefore, when I make mistakes, consequences tend to be bigger, larger, greater, have more effect. And then Harry makes his fatal mistake. Do you honestly like Snape? Notice, he's equating trusting with liking. Right? Trust is not like. Trust has no emotional value to it at all. I neither like nor dislike Severus. Now, I don't know about you, but I read that and I think Lupin is lying through his teeth. He has to say that. Why? Because he wants Harry to keep trusting Snape. Notice how easy it is for everyone into the book after the lightning struck tower. Notice how easy it is for everyone to immediately do what? Snape's evil. Immediately. It's no longer, oh, there's some grand design, some grand plan going on. It's no. Dumbledore trusted him. We didn't know why. It's not like Dumbledore had, the secret goods in a manila envelope, upon my death, open, and it gets revealed. Nope. Okay? So Harry's raising this question now. Lupin and Mr. Weasley say they trust. What's another word for trust? If you trust somebody, what do you put in that person? Faith, hope, belief. Faith and belief more than hope. Hope is a result of the others. Okay? You believe in that person. People do it all the time, presidential candidates. And then the person gets elected president and they don't do anything that they said they're going to do. Or not even presidential candidates. Might be school board or governor or whatever. Okay? Belief. And what happens when one's elected ideal doesn't do what one wants? The press talks about it all the time. They betray that trust. So that the people who voted, elected, no longer believe in that individual. So, is it really a question of how do we know, or in whom do we believe? But this question kind of presupposes this. Because in order to have belief, to trust someone, what must that someone do first? They got to give you a reason. They have to do something. They have to prove him or herself. Why do they trust Dumbledore? Previous Order of the Phoenix, the guy who defeated Grindelwald. And when did he defeat Grindelwald, by the way? Anybody know what year? 1945? Yeah, there's a pretty strong Hitler echo there. Okay? Because his entire adult life has been what? For the force of good, for standing up for the little guy. Well, what's going to happen in book 7? Harry's going to read the rest of the story to channel my inner Paul Harvey, and he's going to discover what? Dumbledore didn't always fight for the little guy, for the greater good, so to speak. Okay? So we have this idea start being raised now, because from here it's gonna percolate, it's gonna germinate in Harry's mind, so that when an event happens in book 7, or when Harry reads something in book 7, that germ, that seed is gonna full bloom in his mind, and rather than belief and trust, Harry's going to be consumed by the opposite, doubt. Total opposite. Disbelief or despair. No hope in Dumbledore. Okay? So, what else happens in that chapter? Notice. So Harry raises the question, maybe Dumbledore's wrong. Maybe his belief in Snape is wrong. And what do we see? Rufus Scrimgeour comes. And what does he ask Harry to do? PR campaign. He wants him to become the Captain America of the Wizarding world, to put on his, little tights and suit and go out there and sell war bonds for the Wizarding world. He wants Harry to be seen popping in and out of the ministry, just, at the opportune time, so that the Daily Prophet can get a picture. Why? Because he says, see if I have a page number here. So 331, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Somewhere around 343 to 345, Harry says, I don't know what you mean, minister. He says, well, it matters to you, of course, whether or not you're the chosen one. Why? Because one of you lives and one of you dies, so it's pretty important to you. He says, but to the rest of the magical community, it's all perception. That's why I said PR, man. What do public relations firms do? What is their entire purpose? To create perceptions. We think Hollywood good at its job, to create fantasies. That's what public relations firms do. They create fantasies, right? They turn the best spin on things. It's what people, and there we go, it's what people believe that's important. But what's he talking about in terms of this? Okay, I said earlier, in order to have this, what must you need? In order for them to believe in Dumbledore, what must Dumbledore have done first? Proven himself, right? How's the ministry proven itself? You're back there. Nope, not at all. What have they done? Previous 5 years. They tried to hide everything. sweep it under the rug. Voldemort's not back. That Harry Potter kid's crazy. Dumbledore's lost his marbles. Book 5. It's what the people out there believe. In other words, Harry, it doesn't matter what you and I know to be true. So Harry's like, well, golly gee, Mr. Scrimger, I still don't know what you're talking about. People believe you are the chosen one. They think you quite about what you are. And what does he get at? It doesn't matter whether you really are or not. In other words, Harry, I don't care if you're the Messiah or not, which is what chosen one means, the anointed one. Okay? What matters is what those people out there think. The chosen one, he says. It's all about giving people hope. The feeling that things are happening, exciting things are happening. What kind of hope, what kind of belief is he talking about? Irrational hope. Notice it's not a rational belief. And I don't mean rational, logical. I mean a belief that is based upon certain facts, certain evidence. He's talking about total pie in the sky. Close your eyes and go, I can do this, just believe. Like Obi-Wan telling, Luke, feel the force. And he's like, it's kind of hard to do when I can't see anything. He's not giving him, in that story, he's not giving him the evidence to believe. Okay? Harry, I don't want to be used. Now, that really means what? You use this for what purpose? It's got a purpose, right? It's to write on a whiteboard, okay? You use this for what purpose? Make phone calls or electronic brain. For me, since I don't remember anything. What's Harry mean? I don't want to be used. See, this is a tool. Shut up, Harry, go away. This is a tool. These are tools. Harry's saying, I don't want to be a tool. And we could go straight to the end of book 7. Because what does it matter? How many of you read all these? Okay, I won't say it. So, Scrimger finishes that chapter. I see you're Dumbledore's man through and through, aren't you, Potter? Harry, yeah, I am. Glad we straightened that out. Notice what Slughorn has gotten Harry to do. He's reasserted this in Dumbledore. Earlier, he's starting to doubt. He's starting to question. And what happens? Slughorn comes in and acts as a foil. In literary terms, literary technique, a foil is a character who's designed to bring out the positive qualities of the protagonist, the main or chief character or sufferer in the story. Slughorn sits there, and it's almost like they bring out their verbal swords. And he thrusts, and Harry parries. And everything he does sharpens Harry. Okay? Problem is, next book, Harry's going to lose his foils. And he's going to have to rely on himself. And he circles like water down a drain. Okay? Sluggish memory. Harry tells Dumbledore about what happened. Okay? We see Marvolo go to prison. Dumbledore tells Harry that he extracted the memory from Marvolo. 22 pages, somewhere around 366 or so. He says, I extracted this memory with difficulty. I attempted to use it to secure Morphin's release from Azkaban. So notice, Dumbledore is suggesting, sometimes you can use memories as evidence. What good did it do? None. Okay. So here's a question. Why does he try to get Morphin out of Azkaban? I think most people, if I were to take a poll right now, I bet most people would go, he's a dirty, rotten SOB. Let him rot in, let him rot in hell. Dumbledore says, whatever Morphin was, he did not deserve to die as he did, blamed for murders he didn't commit. Are we ever told that Morphin ever committed any murder? No. Was he a rotten SOB? Yeah, we saw how he treated Bob Ogden, how he treated Tom Riddle to some extent. Okay? But he didn't deserve to die for that. Kind of like Gandalf talking about Gollum. Not necessarily that Morphin deserved a second chance, but that, he didn't deserve to what happened to him. Birthday surprises, we're going to skip entirely in the not even minute we have left. So, we will pick up with, and that's exactly where I hoped we would get to. I don't actually know that we're going to see anything about Elf Tales. No, we're not. We're going to pick up on, what's today? Today's Wednesday. Pick up on Friday with chapter 20, Lord Voldemort's request, which is probably going to end up taking most of the period, because that's where we're going to finish. Yes. Okay. All right. Have a good day.